Hello and welcome to my Stamping and Stampin' Up 101 video. So I'm making this video today for any of my customers that are new to stamping or new to Stampin' Up. So you might not be familiar with how our products work or what you might be receiving with your first order, and I thought I'd do a quick walkthrough with some tips for how to open and set up some of your supplies. Of course, if you aren't a customer of mine and you find this video useful and you're looking for any of the products that I have, or you are looking for a demonstrator, I'd love to help you out. Be sure to check the description box below the video. I will have links to some of the items that I'm sharing, like tools and things that you may not have purchased, but you think might be helpful for you. And of course, to my online shop. And you can contact me if you have any questions or want some assistance or guidance in getting started with stamping. As I mentioned, this is just for product familiarity and an introduction. We are not going to be creating any projects today, so we won't have finished cards or anything. This is just a little intro to the different types of tools and supplies that you might be starting out with. So let's go ahead and get started. And obviously, the heart and soul of a company called Stampin' Up is going to be the stamps, right? So our stamps come in these DVD-style plastic cases that open like this. And we have two different types of stamps. Let me pull in one of the other types. We have stamps that are sort of the more traditional style of red rubber stamps that are all cut out and intricate designs, but they are made out of rubber. They are obviously not see-through, and they are mounted onto like a piece of cling foam. So that's one type of stamp. The other type of stamp we have are the photopolymer stamps, and they are perfectly clear, as you can see, and they also mount to acrylic blocks, much the same way. So when you're looking at stamps, you'll notice at the top it tells you which type of stamp you have. So on this one it says photopolymer stamp set. On this one it says cling stamp set. And I think I had used this as my example. So here's a photopolymer stamp set that I've already kind of set up. And I wanted to mention that in the catalog, when you're shopping, you can always tell what type of stamp set by reading the description. So here's the flowering rain boots, which I have here, and it's a photopolymer stamp set, and it says so right under the title. It says 11 photopolymer stamps, so you know that that's going to be a clear stamp. Whereas my other stamp set here, the On the Horizon stamps, if you look in the catalog under that one, it says 9 cling stamps are included in this set. So when you see cling stamps, it's going to be this red rubber style. When you see photopolymer stamps, it is going to be the clear style. So in case you guys didn't pay attention to that in the catalogs, or were wondering how to know what the difference was, that's where you can find that out. And they both work pretty much the same. Obviously, you can see through the clear ones, and that is a huge advantage for placement and alignment. But there's the cling stamps are gorgeous and leave beautiful impressions, and they certainly have their place as well. So I work with both all the time and comfortably with both. Okay. So let's take a look at when you first get, so these I've already had, but when you first get a new cling stamp, or excuse me, a photopolymer stamp, it comes on like a backing sheet of acetate like this. You can see I don't have that in here anymore. This is brand new. I just opened this out of the box today, and you can choose to leave it like this, which if you close this, they're sort of, you know, floating around in there. They're not attached to the packaging. But what I typically do is peel this sheet off, and then the inside of your DVD case is kind of like a slick, you know, the plastic, and then this liner that comes has the images printed. So you see that kind of slides in and out, but it has the images printed on this side. So what you can do is just take each of your stamps, peel it off of this if you choose, and then you can put it right on the inside of your packaging. So they're all in the same order. They line up just the same way as they do on this sheet. So they're really easy to figure out where they go, but you can transfer them over. For me personally, I just find it easier, first of all, to get access. So when I open this up and I want a stamp, I can just peel it right off. I don't have to separate the two pieces. So I just kind of personally like that, but that is a choice. You do not have to do it that way. The other thing I like is because I have all these printed images, it's real quick when I'm doing cleanup. It's real easy for me to tell if I have all of my stamps or if I'm missing any, because if there's any gaping holes, then one of these clear guys might be stuck to the back of an ink pad or something, and I can't tell you how often that happens to me. So I'm just kind of moving all of my images over here. It doesn't take too long, and then I have them ready to go. So I won't make you watch me do all of that, but that's something that when you get your first brand new set of photopolymer stamps, you may or may not want to do for yourself. You can also, of course, save this acetate sheet and use it for like a window sheet on a project or for some other purpose. Now the cling stamps, unfortunately, I do not have a new set of this, but the way that those come is there is a big rectangle of rubber, and then each of these stamps is nestled into, like a puzzle, nestled into an opening in the rubber, and that's how it comes. Some people, I think, leave the background in place, and then they take the rubber stamps in and out of the little holes. I just peel the whole background off and toss it, because I just think it's easier to just stick them on here like this. The cling stamps do not have the printed images on the back, but it does tell you on the front how many stamps are in the set. So there are 9, so I can quickly just, decide, do I have my 9 in there? I don't have any missing. Plus these don't go missing quite as easily because they're not see-through. So in another video, when I get a brand new set, I will show you what it looks like, how that comes originally. And then also there's some instructions that you can see on here, like step-by-step kind of photo instructions. And then there's also a link to a video that Stampin' Up! Provides showing how to put these labels on the back of the cling stamps. So the image that is on the back here, you have to apply when you first get the stamp. And it's pretty easy to do. And there's some step-by-step instructions that I'll link you to. And then as soon as I get a new red rubber set, a new cling set, I will do a video for you also. But just so that you know, when you first get your stamp sets, they come looking a little different, and then you can decide how you want to store yours going forward. Okay, let's talk about blocks for a second. Stampin' Up! Has all these different shapes and sizes. There we go. So here's a handful of them. I think these are the same. Yeah, those are both C's, so don't need to see that one. The acrylic blocks are sold as a set or individually, and there's various shapes and sizes, and each stamp set comes with recommendations as to what block sizes will work best. So again, if I go back to my catalog and I look at that Flowering Rain Boots stamp that I had, this says here, not sure how well you can see it, but it says here, suggested clear blocks, B, C, D, and E. So on the sides of the clear blocks, it's probably hard to see, but there's a little etched C on that one. This one is a B. This one is a D. So these are just rectangles in increasing size. This one is an H. So you want to refer to which letter is on the block, and that will tell you what they recommend size-wise. So they also recommended, in the catalog, they recommended the E block, which I do have. This is the E here, which is the largest. So if you look at this, and you look at the stamps when they come, a stamp like this, if I really kind of go edge to edge, I can get it on here, but it's tight. It is like just barely making it on this one. So that's probably why they recommend a slightly larger block for this stamp. I think that's maybe one of the largest. Let's see if this one's larger. Again, this one, it makes it on the block, but it's edge to edge. So, you know, those are just suggested blocks. You could probably get away with just these 2 blocks for this whole set, but it's something that you kind of need to test out and see what fits where. You know, so like this one, I bet they're recommending this little block for some of the smallest stamps in the set, like this pot or like the little seed packet. And that could just as easily go on that block. So you don't need every single block they suggest, but you do need to have an assortment, and you need to at least make sure that you have something large enough to accommodate the largest stamp in your set. All right, so talking about the blocks, if you've never stamped before, you will just peel one of the stamps out of your packaging. One side of the stamps obviously has the image etched into it. The other side is completely flat. And the flat side will just cling right onto the block so that it's stuck there. And this is how you will handle your stamp so that you can get ink onto the stamp and then transfer it onto your project. Okay, the same thing goes with your red rubber stamps. And if I go back to the catalog, again, there's a suggested block size of D, G, and H. Again, that's not mandatory, but it just gives you an idea. And so if I was going to use some of these stamps, I might say, okay, this stamp goes nicely on that block, and this longer one might fit on this block nicely, right? So you just kind of want to choose an appropriate sized block for your stamp. I would not recommend taking a very small stamp and putting it on a very big block. If you do that, the chances of you tipping and hitting this part of the edges of your big block into your ink pad and then transferring and making a mess on your project are just a lot greater. So I do try to be sort of reasonable in my choice of size for an appropriate block for the stamp. Okay, so that's my recommendations on blocks. You don't need to have every single size that's offered, especially if you're just getting started. Just have a couple of options that suit the stamp sets that you have in your collection. All right, let me get these out of the way. And now that we've got our stamps opened up and kind of organized, and we've made sure that we have the coordinating blocks, the next thing we need is some ink, right? So this is what our classic ink pads look like. Okay, they're nice and thin. Here's one that I already have in my collection, and here's a brand new one that I'm going to open right now. I'm going to use my Stampin' Up! Paper snips to just open this plastic off of here. That's how it comes. And you just peel the plastic right off. And the way that the ink pads are designed, a couple things. First of all, I'm not sure if you can see very well in the video, but there are these tiny indentations, these 4 little dots like divots in the top corners. And then on the bottom of each pad, there's corresponding little feet. That makes it so your pads can stack nice and easily on top of one another. So they just kind of slide on top of one another. That's a nice stacking feature. The pads themselves open like a compact. So there's a little raised area here that you can get your thumb into, and you're pulling that part away like this, and it opens 180 degrees. And then once you've got it all the way open, you can slide it so that you have a nice solid surface to ink up your stamp. okay? Another way that some people open these, I kind of tend to do it the compact way, but I think everybody finds their own style. But some people just push down on these two corners, and if you give them a push, pops the pad open, and then you can grab it and open it up and do the same thing. So I think it's just a question of what's easier for you and what habit you develop, okay? And then to close it, you just kind of want to grab this little edge. There's a lip there, and pull out all the way, and then you can flip it over. You do want to make sure that you don't leave this cracked. You want to make sure it's snapped down tight so that your ink pad doesn't dry out. So when you're storing it, it's nice and secure. Okay, as far as labeling goes, you might notice that on the front of my pads, this one that I already have in my collection has the name and the color here. That's something that you do after you receive your ink pad. So on the back, you have these little labels, and there's one little corner that right there that it tells you to grab. So I'm going to grab that and peel back this kind of background piece. And then that is going to expose all of these little stickers. So because I'm in English here, I'm in the US, I'm going to choose the English language sticker that says Orchid Oasis. And I am going to just apply that to the front of my ink pad, right under that little thumb tab for opening the ink pad. Okay, and that way, if I do want to stack my pads or put them in the Stampin' Up! Storage, when I'm looking at the pads from the front, I can see the color and the name very easily and grab the color that I'm looking for. Another thing that I like to do is to take one of the blank ink stickers. I'll go ahead and take that off first. And when I open the pad up, there's this little well right here, this channel. And I like to put the sticker right down in there. And I'll tell you why that helps. If you are working with your pads and you have a couple of colors out, it can be kind of difficult to see what color the actual foam is because the foam is dark and it doesn't show up as the color that it's going to stamp. So by having this little sticker in the channel, I know that this is my green and this is my blue, or my shaded spruce and my Orchid Oasis. So that's just helpful when you have your ink pad open and you're not looking at the cover anymore. Okay, I also want to mention that if you notice, so here's the ink pad with the surface facing up. When I go to pull this open and close it, you see now the surface of the ink pad is facing down for storage. And that is by design. The foam pads are stored upside down inside of here so that the ink is sinking to the surface of the pad, and it's always right there at the top of the pad to get good coverage on your stamp. So that's why they design their stamps that way, or their ink pads that way. One other thing I should point out is you notice that up in the corner of this one, there's a little indicator here that tells me that this is an ink color, whereas this is one of our permanent collection ink colors. So recently, they started adding another blank sticker on these pads. You can see on the older ones, they didn't have another blank one. And so I'm going to use that second blank sticker and I'm going to put it on the back of my ink pad. And not that this is needed so much, but if I've got it, I might as well use it, right? And that way, no matter where my ink pad is sitting on my desk, in any direction, I can kind of tell which one I'm grabbing for. So now I know that this is my Orchid Oasis ink pad, which is one of the new ink colors for 2022 to 24. All right, so that is a good orientation looking at the design and the features of our ink pads and how to open them, how to label them, and everything else to get them ready to go for stamping. So let's take all these things and put them together. We've got stamps We've got stamps and ink and blocks. So let's go ahead and stamp something and give you some basic tips for getting good impressions with your stamps. Okay, the first tip, as I said, is to choose a block that's the appropriate size for your stamp. One of the main things that I see beginners doing is getting ink all over the place on the outside of their block or on the perimeter of their stamp itself, and it just causes for messy fingers, messy projects, ink smears. So keeping the smallest amount of block space is helpful, I think. It also makes it easier to get good pressure and an even image. If you have a tiny little dot in the middle of a big block, you might go down on an angle or tilt and you don't get a nice, crisp, even pressure. So, as I mentioned, we really don't want to have too much ink all over. We just want to kiss the ink with the surface of the stamp. So instead of smooshing down into the ink pad, and I'm going to show you what you don't want to be doing, if you smush down into the ink pad like this, smooshing it hard, you're going to get ink in all the little crevices of your stamp. You're going to get it around the edges of your block, and before long you're going to get it on your project where you don't want it, and it's going to be a mess. So let's wipe that off and let's look at how to do it the right way. Speaking of wiping it off, Stampin' Up! Has spare DVD cases that they sell, and they also sell a chamois like this that you just run under water and keep damp. Fits right inside the DVD case, and that is the perfect way to clean your stamps. I really got a lot of ink on this one, so I really got to clean it out good. Might even have to dig in there a little bit because I went nuts. There we go. And you can do both sides, and this just absorbs the ink right off the surface of your stamp. So that's how we clean it. If you didn't get the chamois, you can use baby wipes to clean your stamps. Any kind of chamois you might have around the house for like household projects, or like a microfiber cloth. There's other products to clean your stamps. Stampin' Up! Also has a Stampin' Scrub pad that has one side that you put a cleaning solution on and the other side that's dry, and you wipe it on the wet side first and then dry it on the dry side. I don't have that to show you, but they do have that in the back of the catalog. So there's several options for cleaning your stamp. So let's get to the correct way to ink up your stamp, which is to tap it. You may have to tap several times, but you are going to tap it instead of smushing it or grinding it into the ink pad. And you can see that that gets ink just on the surface of my stamp where I want it. It does not get it on my block. It doesn't get it into the grooves or around the edges of my stamp. It just gets right on the stamp itself, which is where I want it. To demonstrate the stamping, I just have a scrap piece of our basic white cardstock. You can stamp onto designer paper, like patterned paper. You can stamp onto colored cardstock. I'm just stamping on the white today so that you can really get a good look at how it stamps down. And another tip is, especially with the photopolymer stamps, to stamp on some sort of softer surface that has just a little bit of give to it. If you stamp on a really hard surface, you might not get a great impression every time. So I always recommend stamping on something with a little bit of give. A mouse pad works for this, even a notebook. We have this, Stampin' Up! Sells this product. This is the Stampin' Pierce Mat. It's ideal for this. You can also use, when you buy blocks of this grid paper, it comes in like a great big stack. You can stamp on that, and that'll give you just a little give. But my experience is that you just get a much better result when you have just a little bit of softness underneath the paper. So to stamp, you'll notice the edges of the blocks all have kind of like this ergonomic little groove in there, and your fingertips just fit really nicely inside. I like to hold my block with both hands, And you can see, because this is a photopolymer stamp, you can see right down through the block and through the stamp, and you can see exactly where you're going to make your image on the paper. And that's the beauty of the photopolymer stamps. So you can look straight down, and when you press down onto the paper, you're just going straight down. You don't want to tip or rock or like swirl. You're just going straight down. You want to give it a second for that ink to transfer from the surface of the stamp onto the paper, and then you lift up and you have this beautiful image. Now, I should mention that this stamp set is what's called a distinctive style stamp set, which you can notice that the stamps have dark areas, medium areas, and very light areas, and it's supposed to give the illusion of shading and highlights all within one stamp. So I'm going to get a more solid stamp so you can see the difference. So here I have a leaf stamp, and this is just a little bit more solid. It doesn't have that distinctive style. I'm just going to tap, tap, tap on my ink pad, and you can always check to make sure that you have ink covering your whole surface. And then again, hold with two hands straight down onto your paper and straight up. So you can see that gives a solid image, and that the distinctive ones gives this variated image. So that's the best way to get good impressions. Use a soft surface or a mouse pad or something, or the Stampin' Pierce mat underneath your photopolymer, underneath your paper when you're using photopolymer stamps. Clean your stamps afterward. That is more, to me, that's more about not having inky things around me so that I'm going to dip my sleeve into and stuff like that. And then you always want to close up your ink pads so they stay nice and juicy for you. One more thing I wanted to mention about photopolymer stamps that are brand new. This is the Cup of Tea photopolymer set from the new annual catalog. So exciting. When you have a stamp, especially ones with large, solid surface area like this, when they're brand new, right out of the package, they have almost a little slick, I don't know, the surface is just real shiny. It's almost like it has like a film or something on it. It's part of the manufacturing process, but it makes it so that the first time you ink it up, the ink can like bead up, like pool up a little bit on the surface of the stamp. So it is totally easy to fix. All you want to do is just sort of rub your fingers or the back of your hand or something like this against your stamp, and you'll see that the stamp is no longer like perfectly clear and shiny, and it has more of like a buffed matte appearance. And that's just wiping off that, like I said, whatever that little residue that's on there from the manufacturing process, and it's priming the surface so that it'll be totally ready to accept ink for the first time. So when you get a brand new photopolymer stamp set, especially one that has bold, solid, like surface area on the image, just rub it a little bit against the back of your hand or maybe an eraser or something, and it just buffs up that surface and gets it ready for ink. So now if I take one of my beautiful new in colors, this is Sweet Sorbet, and I'm going to just tap to get ink all over the surface. You can see even now I have a beautiful coverage of ink all over the surface. It is not pooling up or beading up. And I can take my paper and a nice stamping mat, and I'm just going to go ahead and stamp that down with some firm pressure, and you get a perfect image. So I forgot to mention that. I just wanted to make sure that if you're not getting a great image with your photopolymer stamp set right out of the box, you might need to just rub it a little bit on the back of your hand or with your palm or your fingertips or something to get it primed. So that's just basic 101, putting the stamp to paper, and an introduction to stamps, inks, and blocks. I will show a couple of other tools that are handy to have for beginners. So let's pull out a paper trimmer. This is the Stampin' Up! Paper trimmer. And what this allows you to do is to get nice, straight, perpendicular cuts. You can do easy measurements. You can score your paper, cut your paper. It just is a really wonderful tool, especially if you're going to be making quite a bit of cards. You don't want to be cutting with scissors. It's really hard to cut that straight line perfect every time. So let me show you an example. I have a piece of our basic white, and this is just a letter size piece of paper, so it's 8.5 by 11. And if I want to cut this paper in half, and I really want it to be precise and a really straight line, that would be kind of tough to do with a pair of scissors, even a nice sharp long scissors. So what I want to do is lift up this arm of the paper trimmer. I'm going to kind of put this in here at an angle. Hopefully you can see this okay. So I'm going to lift up this arm, and there's a little edge along here that if I slide the paper, it's going to butt up against this edge right here, and it's going to hit it and not be able to go any farther. So I want my paper all the way up to the edge, and then I want to use this ruler to tell me how far into the paper that I want to cut. So if my paper is 8.5 and I want to cut it in half, that means I need to go 4¼ inches from this one edge. So here's my inches here. And then you can see we've got little hash marks all the way down to the 1/16 of an inch. So you can be very precise. Each one of these boxes that runs the entire length is 1/4 inch. So when you go to 4, you can just go right up to this next box right here, and you know you're at 4¼ Of course, you want to be all the way up against this edge over here, like I mentioned, and then you want to find that 4¼ mark, and you get the edge of your paper aligned with that 4¼ mark, and then you close your arm. There's a little handle here to hold your paper in place, and you have 2 different blades that come on your trimmer, and they can both stay on your trimmer the whole time. The gray blade is for scoring your paper. The black blade is for cutting your paper. So we'll get to scoring in a minute, but I'm just going to slide that out of the way so that it is not in the way of my paper. And then I'm going to bring my black blade all the way back, and I am just going to put my finger on it and just slice all the way through the paper. And now I have a perfect cut, perfectly in half, and each of these sheets is exactly 4¼ You can see they line up beautifully, 4¼ by 11. Okay. If we want to create a card base out of this, we could try to bend it around and match up the corners, and then like pinch this together and hope that we got a nice crease here, but odds are it wouldn't come out looking so great. So first, we want to score the paper to make that process easier. So again, this is 11 inches, which means half would be 5.5. So I'm going to use my ruler. I'm going to go to 5 inches and then go 2 more of these big lines to the 1/2 inch mark. So right there is 5.5. And again, all the way up so that it is butt up against this edge. And then I'm going to use the gray blade this time for scoring. And I give that some good pressure, and I might even go back and forth a couple of times. And then hopefully you can see that what that does is it makes an indentation in the paper. It scores it, which makes it really easy to fold it over perfectly into a nice card. Stampin' Up! Does also have a bone folder, and you can see, I let the paper go like this. You can see that right at the moment, even with the score line, it doesn't really lay totally flat. If you take the bone folder and just give it a quick swipe over that seam, it really flattens out the crease and makes it a nice crisp edge right there, and you've got a nice flat card. So this is not a necessary tool. You could use another straight edge or your fingertip or your nail or something, but it's an inexpensive way to accomplish that, and it is, if you're going to be making lots of card, I find it really handy to have. I should also mention that this arm on the trimmer, you probably saw me pull that out before, but it collapses into the trimmer like this, and then it opens and extends all the way out. And that is because if you want to trim, let's say a 10-inch piece, you can line this up. This stays as a continuous edge all the way across. This has to be out all the way. It can't be bent. You have to push it all the way out. But that way you get an extension, and you can measure, if I pull this over, you can measure all the way out to 17 inches. So if you had a really large piece of paper, but let's say I wanted to cut this to 10 inches, I could make sure I line this edge up with the 10-inch mark, then close my arm, and then go ahead and slice. Okay, so the trimmer is a really handy tool for cutting layers, for cutting your designer series paper, for creating your card bases, and all sorts of other things. Here. Okay, I should also share that we have punches. Some of our punches, this is how they come in a little plastic seal here. Some of our punches are meant to coordinate with other products, so they might punch out an image that you have already stamped. And some of the punches do not. They are just like a general shape, and then you can stamp something inside the shape or use it as a layer or whatever you want to do. But all the punches have this locking feature, so I thought I should mention that in case you buy a punch and you can't figure out why it's not opening for you. The locking feature makes it so that your punch stays flat and it's stackable, so you can put another punch right on top of here. But then when you want to use the punch, you need to put your thumb here and slide this piece over, and then it's unlocked. And see how it opens up? So this is the closed position, and that's the open position. And you can see from the bottom that it makes it so that the cutting piece is down in there, and you can now fit a little piece of paper. So if I want to stamp this label, I slide the paper into this slot. And even though it looks like the punch should go like this and that you should stamp down on it, you really can't see where it's going to cut your paper. So I always flip mine upside down, and I slide my paper in upside down, and then I can pinch my fingers together like this, and that will give me the punch. Just like that. Okay? This punch also has a tiny little dot and a little slit. So if I want, I can just put the edge of a piece of paper in and punch a little hole, see? Or I can come to this side and I could kind of line the paper up, and I'm using, see these two metal guides there? I'm using that to line up the top and the bottom, so I feel like I'm going kind of straight. Give that a punch, and now I have a slit, which means I could slide a little ribbon through there, or a little decorative element, tie a bow or something. So that is what this punch will do. So just because my punch has all three openings doesn't mean I need to use all three at one time. You can slide your paper in strategically and just punch the portion that you're looking to punch. Then when I'm done with my punching, I pinch it closed, and while it's closed, I slide this back, and now it's locked in the closed position and ready for storage. So in case any one of you ordered a punch and you didn't know how to unlock it, or didn't know why you couldn't get your paper in there, it's because you need to open it up first. So I thought I should share that. There were two other things that I thought I should mention, again, for maybe first-time orders. If you order dies or a bundle that includes dies, it comes in a package that looks like this. It says Stampin' Cut and Emboss, and then the name of the dies is quite small over here. And you really can't see the dies in their original packaging. So I think it's kind of easy to overlook them because they're tucked in the middle. So let's go ahead and open this. And you just peel the little plastic envelope open. And here is how the dies come. They come, there's a little bit of exposed adhesive, and all the dies are just stuck to this cardboard. So you got to kind of just peel them off. and they come arranged like this. By the way, this happens to be the Stylish Shapes dies from the new 2022 to 2023 annual catalog, coming soon. And I love this collection, but that's a side note. My point is just to show you that even though you couldn't see all of this in the packaging, I didn't want you to move past this envelope and not realize that it was your dies that were inside. So I typically end up putting my dies onto like a magnetic sheet, which you can just get, you know, I don't know, off of Amazon or anything like that. But then I do slide them right back here into this nice sturdy envelope. But when I store them so they're visible. You know, when they came, they were in between, sandwiched between this piece of paper that opens like this, and so you couldn't see them. So when I store them, I like to store them like this so I can real quickly flip through and see what dies I have available. So I like to store them like that. So again, if you were just ordering dies for the first time, I wanted you to know what you were looking for in terms of your packaging and how to get them off of there, which is just to give them a little pull off of that sticky part. And maybe at some point I will do a demo video showing how to do die cutting and sandwiches with our Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine, but I think I'll save that for another video. And finally, embossing folders. These are a little bit easier to spot in your order because they do have an image printed on the front of your embossing folder, but again, you can't see the product from the back. So again, you just peel this envelope open and, oops, I got stuck. And your nice textured embossing folder will be on the inside of this little folded piece of paper. So again, you can keep it, I like to keep mine so that it's more exposed so that I can see what my pattern looks like. So I think I covered most of the basics. If you're stamping for the first time or you've just placed that first Stampin' Up order and you're super excited, you're opening your box and, you know, some of these things you're like, I don't know how to open this and how come mine doesn't have a label on it already? I wanted you to just see a couple of the getting started tips and tricks for getting things opened and labeled and recognizing why things are packaged the way they are, how products coordinate. And another thing I should mention is there are just so many hints and tips in our various catalogs. And that is something that you should take full advantage of. It can be overwhelming looking through these catalogs because there's so much to take in and so much pretty stuff to look at. This happens to be the mini catalog, January to June. But I wanted to point out a couple things. There are some icons that go along with the various products. So take a look at the beginning on your table of contents page, and it's helpful to be able to spot some things real quick. One other thing out, when you are looking at the stamp sets that have coordinating dies, so the images that are shown in the catalog are always shown at 100% size unless it says otherwise. For example, if you've got a background stamp or some larger stamps, they will tell you that the artwork is shown at a different size. So for example, this background stamp is shown at 50% size, and then they give you a little blow up so you can see what the 100% size would be. Same thing with this one. If you don't see that, then you can assume that these images are the exact size that they will be in your stamps. They're shown at 100% size. So that's something to pay attention to. The other thing to know is, it's a little hard to see, but do you see how this image right here does not have like an outline around it? And this one has a faint white outline all around it. So what it's telling you is that the coordinating dies will cut an outline around this shape as shown here. So from this set, you have a die that will cut this out because it has an outline. You have a die that will cut this out because it has an outline. The stem, both of the leaves, this little blade of grass, and this flower right here. So all of these images have coordinating dies in the set that coordinates with this stamp set. So if you purchase the bundle or if you purchase the dies separately, it's easy to see from the catalog which of these items will be cut out. If you look at another example here, this is the Tulip Fields stamp and die set. The clouds have little white outlines around them, so those have die cuts that match. This tree and the windmill and this little bush off in the distance. But these pieces do not have die cuts, nor does this border piece have a die cut that matches. So that's something to note when you are looking at bundles if you want to have matching die cuts. So as you start looking through the catalog, hopefully those tips help you recognize, there's a lot of information in here. As I mentioned, it tells you what type of stamp it is. It tells you suggested blocks. If it comes in other languages, it tells you if it coordinates with other products, and then it'll show you which of the images have coordinating dies. So that's just a little glimpse into all the good information that you can find in the catalog, let alone the inspiration and cool project ideas. The other thing I would say to you is if you're just getting started and you're opening up your stamps for the first time, do not jump right into trying to create some finished product. Just pull out blank paper and stamp away. Try out every one of your ink colors, try out every one of your stamps, test it all, and just play. You'll start to get more familiar with the process of stamping. You'll start to get more familiar with your different color choices, with the pressure and how much you should be pushing down. Just stamp. That's the best way to start. Don't think about creating a card or creating a project. Just get your stamps out and stamp, stamp, stamp. And that's the best way to get started. And as you do that, I promise you inspiration and ideas will kind of start to flow. Plus your comfort level and familiarity with the products won't become an obstacle to creating that first project. So I hope that was helpful. I hope I didn't ramble on too much. I wanted to provide this resource for both present and future customers of mine so that I could always direct them to this when they receive their first order and hopefully help them get all of those products into their crafty stash and start using them with ease and with success. So thanks so much for tuning in. I will try to follow this up with a couple of other how-tos, like I said, with the die cutting machine or a couple of other tips, but I really wanted to start with the basics for someone who's just getting their very first order. Thanks again. Check the description box for links if you're interested in anything I shared, and by all means, go over and browse in my shop. And if you are looking for a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator and could use some help or guidance making some selections, please reach out to me in the comments. I would love to help you out. Have a terrific day.